Hello, everybody. I'd like to go ahead and get started so we keep our record of timeliness going as best we can. So if everyone can get their breakfast and their coffee, have a seat, we can begin. So on behalf, my name is Dr. Mark Wiggensberg in pediatrics and pediatric endocrinology, and also director of the Institute of Integrative Health. And so on behalf of that institute, I'd like to welcome you all here, those who are new and those who are returnees, to our monthly breakfast symposium. The purpose of these symposium is that we hear really fascinating talks in various topics of integrative health and integrative medicine. And then towards the end of the hour, hopefully that will stimulate some good conversation and discussion about where this topic might play a role in our efforts to really build a good collaborative community of researchers and clinicians in the field of integrative health at USC. So this morning it's my distinct honor to be able to introduce Dr. Jim Adams, who is Associate Professor at the School of Pharmacy and the Department of Pharmacology and Pharmaceutical Science. I knew I wouldn't get it completely. I'd also like to welcome or thank the School of Pharmacy and Jim's department for hosting us this morning. It was very gracious of them. So Jim, besides being an expert in the science of pharmacology, is also very versed in indigenous plant medicine, particularly along the lines of the Chumash tradition. And so without further introduction, I'll let Jim tell you the rest of what he's here to tell us this morning. Jim?
I always start with prayer. Yahane, hane, yaho, yaho, atap. Yahane, hane, yaho, yaho, atap. Yahe, yahane, yahe, yahane. Yahane, hane, yaho, yaho, atap. Yahane, hane, yaho, yaho, atap. Yahe, yahane, yahe, yahane. Sacred way, Lord, sacred way, help me to live in a sacred way. Lord, you promised the buffalo would always return. Lord, you promised their days would never end. All you asked, Lord, was for us to live in a sacred way. Sacred way, Lord, sacred way, help me to live in a sacred way. Lord, you promised the salmon would always return. Lord, you promised that days would never end. All you asked, Lord, was for us to live in a sacred way. Sacred way, Lord, sacred way, help me to live in a sacred way. Thank you for coming today. I'm Jim Adams, and the reason I always start with prayer is because I've been taught by the Chumash people for about 15 years now about healing, and I promised them that I would always do it the right way. So you always start with prayer. And you can see I'm wearing a necklace that was made for me by a Chumash woman. She made it for me to use when I lecture, and her name is Mrs. Lamos. She's Frank Lamos' mother. So I always have to start with my Western credentials, otherwise people get all frightened. I have a PhD in pharmacology from the University of California, San Francisco in 1981. I've been here for 25 years as a professor of pharmacology. I've been studying Chumash healing now for about 15 years. And I had a teacher who was a Chumash healer. I worked with her for 14 years, but she walked on a year ago in May. And so now I picked up her burden. And so now I call myself a Chumash healer because what God wants me to do is to help preserve Chumash healing. So I do that the best I can. And my family have always been Native American healers. My family came here to this country in 1635 to Virginia. My first ancestor was William Adams, the surgeon. He learned healing from the Indians of Virginia. He made a few mistakes, but let's not talk about that. And so my family has always used American Indian healing. When they moved to Kentucky in 1790, to Indiana in 1810, to Missouri in 1830, and to Oregon in 1870, we've always used American Indian healing. And so my grandparents taught me American Indian healing when I was a child. And I always was given the option. Do you want to go to the American Indian healer or the doctor? And the American Indian healer was a lot harder to find, so I usually went to the doctor. Anyway, so this is the book that I wrote with my teacher, and it's back there if you want to look at it. This book, we worked very, very hard on it, and all of the photographs but one in that book are my photographs, so I hope you enjoy them. And this is a self-published book, so the USC bookstore won't sell it. You know, when I was a kid, all of my medicines came from plants. And when the doctor gave me something that wasn't from a plant, my grandmother would take that non-plant medicine and she would throw it in the garbage and she'd say, here's a plant medicine for you to use. It's going to be so much better. So I never had antibiotics when I was a kid. I never had the only thing I really had was the inoculations that we were required to have. But everything else was plant medicines. And, you know, one of the problems that we have in our society is we think we're too smart. We think that our medicines are so powerful and they can cure everything and cure all of our problems. And the truth is that we have, for 200 million years. I left a million off of there. 200 million years humans have been on this planet, and we've always used plant medicines. And what a shame it is that we have forgotten what our grandmothers should have taught us. My grandmother taught me. And my grandfather too, and I'm so grateful. And I'm grateful to the Chumash people for teaching me also. By the way, that prayer that I sang for you, I started out with the Chumash deer song. We give thanks to God for deer. And then I went into a song that I wrote. Because as a healer, one of my jobs is to write my own songs and create my own healing. So you can go to my website and all my healing songs are there. Here are my collaborators from all over the place. I have a student from Brazil working with me this summer. He's not here right now. He doesn't like to get up this early in the morning. So I don't know what his grade is going to say that he's not at my seminar, but anyway, I can't force him to do anything. He's from Brazil. So I'm going to start out with this plant. This is chia. And those of you who wonder, everybody always asks me, is that the same chia as in chia pet? The answer is no. The chia from chia pet comes from Mexico. That's Salvia hispanica. This is Salvia columbari from California. It's also called golden chia to distinguish it from the chia from Chiapas in Mexico. So in Chiapas, there's a big region called Chiapas where one of the primary things they make is chia. And whenever you buy chia, like on the internet, it's usually about $10 to $15 a pound. It comes from Mexico. I don't know anybody who sells the California chia seeds. So this is an annual sage, and as you can see, it has these beautiful purple or blue flowers. The flowers are tiny. They're like 6 millimeters long. And you can see this part here is the seed pod. And the seed pod has these huge bracts on it. These things right here. And when the flowers fall off, you're left with the inside here, the seed pod is where the seeds are. And there are hundreds of them in there. So the way to collect the seeds is that you put these bracts, these seed pods, in a big basket. And you swirl it around maybe with a stone or something to break them up and get the seeds out of there. And let me just tell you that gathering these seed pods is very painful because of those spines on there. Very painful. So the people who collect chia seeds, I'm willing to pay them $10 a pound. I don't even question it. $15 a pound, okay. Just so long as I don't have to do that. So chia, Salvia columbari. This chia from Mexico is Salvia hispanica. That's especially from Chiapas. And the Chumash word for chia is gilepesh. And you notice that I pronounce the glottal stop. I'm an expert in pronunciation of glottal stops because I speak Cantonese that is full of glottal stops. So the proper pronunciation is gilepesh. It's an annual sage. It has a mild sage smell. Some people really can smell it and really enjoy the smell of chia. I can walk through a whole field of it and not smell it too much. The leaves are basal and pinnate. Pinnate means they're shaped like a feather. There's usually a flower stalk, sometimes multiple flower stalks up to 3 feet tall with those huge seed clusters. The seed clusters can be up to like 3 or 4 inches across. And the flower is claw-shaped, grows in the chaparral. There's plenty of it growing up there in these hills right now. Found in California, Arizona, Utah. This is a picture of the whole plant. I just took this photograph a week ago on Tuesday, and this is up in the mountains up there near Cloudburst Summit. It's about 6,500 feet in elevation. So you can see here's a seed cluster up here. There's another seed cluster here that's bent over to show you the bottom. And here are the pinnate leaves growing next to the ground. That's where they're called basal. So an annual sage, it tends to come up in April and May, and then it's usually gone by June or July, depending on the elevation. It's fairly common here in Southern California if you know where to look for it. And I know where to look for it. So traditional uses. This is the plant that all the runners use. So I'm a runner. I run 8 miles every day, except this morning I had to come to a seminar, and some ungodly hour. And so I've run 22 marathons, and whenever I run long distance, like more than 8 miles, I drink chia as I'm running. So in the old days, people would carry chia seeds in pouches on their belts, so that when they needed it, they could always mix it up and drink it. So chia contains about 60% of its calories from fat. That's a pretty high fat content, but these are polyunsaturated fats, not animal fats. Has a fair amount of carbohydrate in it, which you need if you're a runner. So what I do when I'm running is I mix a ½ cup of chia seeds into 1½ quarts of water. I have a 1½ quart bottle, and that's what I drink when I'm doing my 16 and 20-mile runs. And it keeps me going. I haven't died yet. Medicinal uses. When I was working with my teacher, this is one plant that she was very shy about teaching me about. She'd teach me about the running part, and then she'd say, well, it's also nutrition in the old. And then finally, after we've been working together for about 3 or 4 years, she also taught me the most important use of this plant, to wake the dead. And at that time, I was working on stroke, so I looked at her and I said, wow, if it wakes the dead, it must be good for stroke. So the way you use it in someone who has had a stroke or a heart attack is 1 tablespoon of chia seeds and 10 tablespoons of water, and you stir it for 15 minutes, and this is what you get right here. This is what you get. So let me pass it around so you can see what it is. Chia seeds are covered with mucoprotein, and that mucoprotein expands like crazy in water, and it forms this glue-like substance. So this one has been sitting around for a little long, so it's getting kind of thick. But the point is that when you're giving it to someone who's had a stroke, you want them to be able to keep it in their mouths. And you know how stroke patients, everything dribbles out of the mouth, and so you want them to have something fairly thick that will actually, they'll be able to keep down, to swallow. Usually they have problems with swallowing also. So this is what you give to someone who's had a stroke. You give it to them 2 or 3 times a day immediately following a stroke. You do not wait. And at the same time, you're also helping them with their physical activity. So they're doing mild exercise like Tai Chi, yoga, some sort of aqua aerobics. They're walking. You have to continue to exercise also, because otherwise that paralysis that you're having in one of your arms will never go away. You have to continue the exercise with the chia. So you do it 2 or 3 times a day for the first couple of months, and then you can slack off to once a day, but you keep the therapy going for at least 6 months. And if you do that, the paralysis will either pretty much go away, or at least it will be better. The idea of this medicine is to help people get back to being productive again, so they can do their jobs again and keep the village going. So it's important to have chia, to wake the dead. So no one had done any of the chemistry of this plant before I started working with my teacher, so she and I gathered some, and this is a soapstone bowl. Among the Chumash people, soapstone is a very important stone because you can carve beautiful bowls like this, and this is what you would, if you were a very traditional person, you would make your chia seeds in this. It's about the right size. And you can buy this from Tony Ayala. Actually, this is mine. You can't buy this one. But Tony Ayala lives up in Oxnard, as I recall, up there by the coast. Nice guy. So chia from Mexico has been explored, and chia from Mexico is actually very similar to California chia. It is high in alpha-linoleic acid, which is an omega-3 fatty acid, and it's good for people with heart disease. It's been studied in several clinical trials and been shown to help people with heart disease. And there's a recent meta-analysis in 251,049 patients that seems to indicate that people who eat more alpha-linoleic acid are healthier in general, probably because they're eating more plant material and less meat, but that's another issue that we don't need to get into right now. But anyway, it's showing you that alpha-linoleic acid is good for your heart, which has got to be good for preventing heart attack and preventing stroke. So what I did with my teacher is we gathered the plant and we ground it up and analyzed it on the HPLC mass spectrometer, and we found these tanchinones in chia: miltionone, cryptotanghinone, and tanghinone 2A. And these are diterpenoids. So you can see that they have this 3-ring structure. There's an extra ring added on there just for fun. But diterpenoids all have this 3-ring pyrene structure. So I did a literature search to find out more about conchinones and found that they are useful for decreasing coagulation. They're neuroprotective, and they seem to be good things to have. They're also found in a Chinese plant called dansun. And so I wrote an article in Chinese medicine, and I wrote an article in evidence-based complementary and alternative medicine on these compounds. I also found this beast of a compound. It took me 2 years to prove the structure of this compound. Those of you who are chemists, are there any chemists in the room? Sorry. There are too few chemists around these days. I had to do all kinds of 2-dimensional NMR experiments to prove this structure, cozy, nosy, tozy, all of that stuff. It took 2 years to prove this structure. And I finally published it over here, Open Natural Products Journal, last fall. This is beta-citosterol lithospermic acid. So you have 3 beta-citosterols here, and this part here is lithospermic acid. And that's the most abundant compound in chia. So lithospermic acid is good at decreasing blood clots and increasing blood flow. And beta-citosterol, of course, is FDA approved for addition to foods because it lowers cholesterol and helps prevent heart disease. So you can see chia seems to be a pretty good plant to have around. And so I did some literature searches on dansun in China. And so those of you who don't speak Mandarin, this is pronounced dan, which means red, and sun, which means a medicinal plant. And so the root of dansun is red, but the flowers are blue. It looks a lot like chia, in fact. And dansun is a annual sage from China, Korea, and part of Japan. And it's been used in China for a long time. So I had some Chinese, they're gone, they've left the building now, but I had some Chinese colleagues, and we wrote a big review article on dansun, and the 33 clinical trials published in China, in Chinese. No, I don't read Chinese, but my colleagues did. And so we published this article showing that dansun is very useful in stroke, and it is the #1 medicine that they use in China against stroke. And it contains conchinones and lithospermic acid, very similar to chia, very similar. They have an injectable form in China. They also have oral forms. So in China, the idea is that once you've had a stroke, you immediately begin dansun, and you continue that for 6 months, and during the same time you're doing your Tai Chi and other exercises to help with your paralysis. And these 33 trials, the end point in these trials is reduction of paralysis. So hopefully we will learn from the Chumash and the Chinese how to treat stroke patients better than we do today. That is my hope. I'm going to move on to my next medicine, which is this one, California sagebrush, Artemisia californica, which is an abundant plant in the hills around LA. It's also called coastal sagebrush because it likes to grow near the coast. It doesn't get too far inland. And you can see it has these thread-like leaves on it. It grows in big bushes up to about 5 or 6 feet tall and maybe 10 feet wide. And it has this amazing, fabulous smell that I love so much. My wife doesn't like it as much, but that's life, you know, what can I do? So this plant is used for 2 things. the #1 use for it is, oh, and the Chumash name for this plant is kapshik. The #1 use for this plant is to induce pleasant memories. So what my teacher used to do is she would make little balls about this big, cloth balls, and stuff them with the dried leaves of this plant. And she'd give them to her friends to keep in their cars, so that as they were driving, if someone cut them off, they could squeeze that ball and have pleasant memories and be more pleasant and drive more safely. It's also useful for people who are getting older and crankier, and we're not supposed to say Alzheimer's disease, but that's probably what it is. And so you can induce pleasant memories that way. #1 use is for pain. It's a very powerful pain reliever. And so I make it, and here's a bottle of it that I'll pass around for you you can smell it. And it's got rubbing alcohol in it, so please don't drink it. You can see here it says for topical application only. And it's called Elder's Winter Medicine, and I own the trademark on it. So this is a very powerful pain reliever, more powerful than morphine.
Does it work for runner's aches?
What I do when I run a marathon,
Yes.
I rub it on my legs and then I run the marathon.
Does it work?
If it didn't work, I wouldn't be standing here today.
I agree.
After 22 marathons, are you kidding me? And after my 20-mile runs, I put it on my legs also. It's great for arthritis pain, rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis. It's great for sprains, strains. When somebody bends down to pick up a box, that kind of strain and sprain, and they can't straighten up anymore. It's great for people who fall down and hurt themselves to where they can't sit properly or walk anymore. I've also used it for cancer pain. So one woman who had hepatocellular cancer that had metastasized into her lungs, and she couldn't sleep, and she was making her daughter miserable, and so her daughter would rub it on her torso to help her diminish the pain, and she said the pain would go from 10 to 3. Okay, that's better than nothing. And of course she was taking massive doses of oxycodone, and she had a fentanyl patch on, and you become tolerant to those things very, very quickly. Question?
How fast does it work, and what's the duration?
Okay, so the duration depends on the intensity of the pain. The quickness is about 10 or 15 minutes. So for instance, when my wife fell down and she broke her kneecap, and she was howling in pain, and Vicodin didn't touch her pain, she actually allowed me to use this Chumash medicine on her. And she said that it felt cold as I rubbed it on her kneecap. And then within 10 minutes, she said her pain went from 10 howling in pain to 3. And so about 3 hours later, she said the pain was starting to come back. She was up to a 5 or a 6 again. I put it on again, and she said her pain went to 0. And that's all she required, 2 treatments for a broken knee. And so people who, like osteoarthritis, when they get out of bed, they're all, it's always the worst in the morning, right? So they put it on, and 1 application a day is usually all they need. I have a friend who I think he was in a car accident and messed up his neck, had a bad whiplash and all that, and can't sleep at night because of that pain in his neck. He just puts it on right before he goes to sleep, and his wife says that he can sleep again, which makes her so happy. So this is California sagebrush, and before I started working with my teacher, no one had done any of the chemistry of this plant at all. It's just so bizarre that we have all these powerful medicines that are all around us, and nobody even looks at them. And, I have to tell you, that what my teacher taught me was we don't look at these things because of racism, anti-Indian racism, that we don't think that Indians could have possibly done anything worthwhile. I'll let you decide if she's right or not. So we started investigating this plant. Oh, this is how to make the medicine. 90 grams of sagebrush leaves in 500 milliliters of isopropanol. Put it in the dark for 3 to 6 weeks. And you use a cotton ball to apply it where you need it in small amounts. So I have a bunch of it in my lab and I sell it. That bottle is $30. I can't give it away because, you know, the Chumash medicine is important, so you should pay for it. So sagebrush contains 15 monoterpenoids that I discovered. And most of these are powerful pain relievers. They're also anxiety relievers. And it was published here in Pharmaceutics and the Journal of Pharmacognosy and Phytotherapy. This was a girl from France who was working with me 3 summers ago. And these compounds relieve pain by interacting with these transient receptor potential cation channels in the skin. So the skin is the primary site of pain sensation. It's also where we sense hot, heat, and cold. And so we have a number of these different transient receptor potential cation channels, the vanilloid type, the ankyrin type, and forgotten what M stands for. Anyway, let's move on. So these are the structures of the monoterpenoids. Now, cineol is a well-known monoterpenoid. It's also called eucalyptol, and you can buy it in cough drops to help soothe your throat. Camphor is a well-known monoterpenoid that's present in a lot of medicines because it smells good, and it has kind of it has that medicinal taste that some people like, so it's used a lot in medicines. Methodienol we don't use in non-Chumash medicine. And carine we also don't use in non-Chumash medicine, but hopefully someday we'll learn. And so there are 15 of these monoterpenoids in there that are all powerful pain relievers. And this is how they work. So the skin contains all of these transient receptor potential cation channels, and when these channels open, they admit calcium into the cell, and then the impulse is transmitted up here through the dorsal root ganglion into the spinal cord, which then communicates up here into the brain, into the thalamus and the hippocampus, where the pain is processed. And so in normal hospital medicine, what we do is we give opioids to kill the pain up here in the brain. And the problem with opioids is that they cause massive tolerance, and they also kill patients by respiratory depression and seizures. All opioids induce seizures, and people forget that. I don't know why. Especially in children, opioids induce seizures and kill children. It's so sad. And so 14,000 people every year are dying from prescription opioids in this country. 3,000 die from heroin overdose. The other way we treat pain is with the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories that are COX inhibitors, and they alter the prostaglandins that are pain-inducing agents. But this tincture that I'm passing around, it interacts with these guys in the skin, and that's all it does. You put a small amount where you need it. It's cleared very rapidly from the body, but it will give you 2 to 4 hours of pain relief, or more, depending on your level of pain. And it's only useful for severe pain. It's not useful for people who think they kind of might be in pain and, oh, I've got this little twitch right here, I think, you know, it doesn't help with that kind of pain. I don't know anything that does. Except if you take an aspirin and go away, then that will help. You know, get out of my office, that will help. So, which is what doctors do, right? So as you can see, there's also a descending limb here that goes from the brain back into the spinal cord and then back out to the skin. And so you have this pain cycle that you can break at any point in the cycle. And so it's so much safer to break it in the skin. Just rub a little bit on where you need it. And we don't have to endure the 100,000 ulcers that we get from NSAIDs every year and the 10,000 people who die from those ulcers every year. If we would only learn from the Chumash people how to do this. So of course, I tried to work with the pain clinic here over there to use this medicine in pain patients. And I applied to the FDA. I applied for an IND, which they would not grant because they wanted me to do more experiments. And one of the experiments was they wanted toxicity tests in 2 animals, like mice and pigs. So I applied to the NIH for a grant to do those experiments, and the NIH would not give me money to work on this plant medicine because the NIH only wants to work on single purified drugs. They do not want to work on plant medicine. And you know, I am aware that there are a couple of grants that have been given for plant medicines, but I sure can't get one. And I have sure tried. So hopefully someday we'll start learning from Chumash people. That's what my prayer is. I certainly have learned, and my job is to preserve Chumash healing since my teacher has walked on. Yeah?
It would seem from that figure that this might have a good role in neuropathic pain, say
Absolutely.
Post-zoster neuropathy or diabetic neuropathy.
Yeah, it's used a lot by people who have shingle pain, and it works very well. Diabetic neuropathy, I don't know that I've used it in diabetic neuropathy because they all have arthritis as well, and I need to work with you to figure out the difference between diabetic neuropathy and arthritis in the same patient, which I'm sure you can teach me. Yeah.
Are Chinese scientists doing those tests and studying this the way you would want to do it?
I'm not aware of a Chinese medicine that is equivalent to this.
But do their scientists do the kind of studies that you would like to do?
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, in China they study plant medicines all the time.
So get rare from China.
There you go, it's so easy. Good thing I speak Chinese, yes.
Actually, that's not so far-fetched.
No, it's not.
There's actually the idea that you are doing that similar type of research on something they're familiar with. I think they'd be quite happy to at least entertain the idea that their philosophy and approach of medicine, herbal medicines, is something that a Western doctor is looking into. And I think that's actually a really good way to check into the consulate and see what the direction might be to do that.
Great idea. Good thing I just wrote a book on Chinese traditional medicine that was published in March with the Royal Society of Chemistry. But, you know, it's a great idea. So these are the patients that I have documented that I've used it in, and it has to be real pain. You know, like 7 or above. It has to be real pain. Broken knee, replaced knees. You know, all these people who get their knees replaced so that they can be 25 years old again and you know, get out there and run 2 marathons, and I keep telling them, you know, it's not going to happen. Because that replaced knee will never be as good as the knee that you're getting rid of. But they, oops, pressed the wrong button, I'm sorry. Hello, there it is. So when they replace their knees and their hips, they rub this stuff on And within 10 to 15 minutes, they can go out for their walk with their dog. Sprains, I've used it on several people. We have this guy in the building who delivers computers, and one day he was walking around like this. And I said, "Chris, what happened to you?" And he said, "I picked up 2 computers at once." And so I put some of this on his back, and he was walking around okay. Back pain. Do I need to say much about back pain? Chronic back pain, cancer pain, arthritis pain, osteo and rheumatoid arthritis. I've given talks to groups where these women walk in like this, and it means this knee hurts so much they can't bend it, and when they sit down they have to sit with their knee like this, you know. They rub this stuff on and then they can walk out. It's so wonderful to see. So I think that's the end of my talk, and if you have questions I'll be glad to answer them. Yeah.
With a sagebrush, you said it induces pleasant memories. Can it be used for people who have bad dreams? Can they sleep with it? So smell with the sagebrush?
I use something else for pleasant dreams to get rid of nightmares. This you can use in addition, but I use mugwort for that. Mugwort is so wonderful for pleasant dreams and getting rid of nightmares. And I grow it in my garden. If you need it, let me know. Other question? Yeah.
Well, just a comment really is that one of the things we're trying to do here is spark some ideas for collaborations. And, I mean, so it seems to me these, you know, particularly that California sagebrush is just, you know, aching for some clinical trials. So great ideas for alternate sources of funding. I mean, as the sequester dries up the few dollars that NIH has left, you know, no doubt those budgets will not get better fast. So looking for alternate sources, but, you know, to try to do some of this. But one of the things I thought of too, because you were speaking about stroke patients, elderly, yoga, tai chi. I mean, you know, we have George Salem doing yoga studies in elderly, and it might be interesting to tack an arm. I mean, you know, he's interested in, you know, doing a pilot or something where you tack an arm, where you add the chia remedy on top of a movement-based therapy for that.
That would be exciting. And chia is not a medicine, it's a functional food. And it's a traditional food, so everyone can eat it any time. And so getting an IND for a functional food is much easier than for a medicine. So all I need is the people who are interested in doing the study with me. Yeah?
I'm very interested in chia for a number of reasons. One is I've messed with juices and different things, and kids, it's almost like a bobo drink. You know, I mean, it's one of those things that really would work well in our liver tonic or something. How much, do you have any idea what it does to liver metabolism, glucose metabolism? Do you have any biomarkers or anything?
That's an interesting question. I'd have to do some research on that and think about that. It's got a fair amount of carbohydrate in it and a lot of fat, and I don't know how much fat a person with liver disease can tolerate. But, you know, it might be interesting to...
Well, it's like omega-3.
It might...
Isn't it omega-3 fat?
Right.
So
right.
it's an anti-inflammatory.
Yeah, but you know, liver patients, you know, the primary pathway for fatty acid metabolism is through the liver, and once you start knocking out the liver, it accumulates fat until it becomes a fatty liver and dies. So, you know, I'd have to think about that. It might be worth trying, at least in patients with, you know, small enough, not too much liver disease. I don't know. Interesting.
The Pittsburgh Pediatric Obesity Group has studied omega-3s in particular with fatty liver in obese kids.
I'm talking about the actual whole food.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is that it would give some credence because they have found that that's effective in reducing liver fat fraction by MRI.
Wow. There you go.
So that this is so high in the alpha-linoleic, so there's at least some rational basis to some, you know, pre-existing work that might support.
Yeah, in fact, chia is the highest source of alpha-linoleic acid, so yeah. sounds like a great idea. Why not?
The FDA does have a more accelerated route to get INDs for natural products if you give them in a way that's already being used in practice.
Right.
Now, when you start to isolate compounds and give them at higher doses, that's when they start to require toxicology and animal studies. So there may be a more accelerated route to get an IND, because we've gotten INDs on several Chinese and Tibetan herbs and tested them in patients. Of course, that was a while ago, and the FDA has changed their stance, but they still do have an accelerated route. And then the other potential option is if, since Native American healing is, in some cases, allowed as a practice in the U.S., I think in California it is, you could potentially do a randomized study where you simply take a group of patients with a defined clinical syndrome, whether it's neuropathic pain or cancer pain, and do just a serial study where everybody gets treated, but you carefully measure safety and side effects and then pain on a scale, and show some of the things that you've described, but show it in a clinical trial. I think that as you start to generate a body of evidence, then you can be much more successful in applying for grants. I think that it's always hard to get grants when you're trying to start something new and you don't have a lot of background data. But the question is, where would you start? The NCI actually used to have a best case series where you could actually assemble cases. And this was run through the Office of Complementary and Alternative Medicine within the NCI, OCAN. Jeffrey White is the head of that. I don't know if they still have that program, but that would allow you to simply assemble cases that you've had with best evidence or best documentation. So if you had, say, doctor's visits and you could assemble, say, 10 cases, that they might then fund a more focused clinical trial. But these are all things that could be considered. As Mark said, it is obviously harder to get things funded, but NCAM is always looking for interesting, well-designed studies, especially things that use established forms of medicine that have centuries of tradition, because it's felt that those are probably a good starting point. So it's just the whole observational trial and error, passing down things that have been refined over the years is a much better starting point than.
I don't want to be argumentative with you, but we think we're a lot smarter than we are, especially study sections. And so when I applied, they told me, this is not a traditional medicine, you're using rubbing alcohol. And I wrote in the application, in the old days, whale oil, bear grease, and eel oil were used. And now I can't get those things, so I have to use rubbing alcohol. Oh, that makes it not a traditional medicine. We're just too smart for our own good. We really are. And, hopefully someday we'll learn to not be so smart. But I appreciate your suggestions, and I would love to work with anyone who wants to take that kind of approach. I've been beating my head against the wall long enough. I need to have somebody help me. Yeah.
Mila, I think that's the name of the company that, I want to say they slice, but there's a term for it. They take chia seeds and they put it through something that's very sharp, and they claim that you need basically to put flax or chia or whatever through a coffee grinder because the absorbability of the fat. How true is that?
Yeah, I mean, what they're trying to do is increase the delivery of alpha-linoleic acid. I don't think that's necessary. I have their products at home, and I have done my own randomized non-double-blind study where I've compared the two, the whole chia seeds and their ground up stuff with whatever else they put in it, chocolate and God knows whatever superfood they put in there. I think chia's better. Just whole chia seeds. I prefer it. That's me. Yeah.
How did the Chumash use it for just functional eating? And what recipe type ideas did they use for daily eating?
Over chia, there are many ways you can eat it. One is you can drink it like I taught you. The other way is you can just put it in your mouth and eat it. But you have to swallow it because it tends to stick in your mouth. The other way is you can bake it in your acorns. You can bake it in your acorn soup, or you can bake it in your acorn bread, acorn muffins. We don't have any acorn muffins today. And why don't we eat acorns? plain and simple, it's racism. That we will not eat what American Indians eat. Korean people eat acorns. Go to a Korean market, you can buy all the acorns you want. White people will not eat acorns. We think they're toxic. That is the residual racism that we're suffering from, yes?
Hi, I'm from neurology, and so I'm particularly interested in your stroke comments, and also the comments about shoes. I have two questions. One is, you've obviously reached out to the pain center people, but have you presented some of this information to the stroke specialists? Because they have, they would be perhaps collaborators, and so I'd be willing to facilitate that.
Fantastic. I would love it if you would do that.
And then the unrelated question to just bring up another. I'm also an endurance athlete, and there's a million products on the market to take this, and then you'll run a faster marathon. I don't do marathons, but anyhow. So the question is, have you put this stuff in a bottle and taken it to events, and promoted it? Where's USC Stevens to help us? Because I haven't seen something with this particular perspective. Well, I think that we just need to get you and forget the science here. Just
no, I think that's a great idea, and of course, as this guy mentioned, Chumash healers are protected by California state law. I am allowed to practice Chumash healing in California state, and because it is a traditional method, and so I am allowed to make and sell traditional medicines here in the state of California. Now the FDA is going to try to shut me down because I'm not using whale oil. Now if the FDA can supply me with whale oil, I'll be glad to have them arrested for using an endangered species.
They probably fund Monsanto to make some for you.
So, yeah, but you see, the problem is that if I start using jojoba oil or the other whale oil substitutes, then they're going to say, well, it's not traditional. Yes?
I think I've seen in health food stores that there are chia drinks.
Oh, yeah. There are lots of them. You can buy bottled chia drinks all
right,
over.
You can buy chia drinks, but I just wondered if we used it in the realm of selling it to the athletes.
In Mexico, they have them. And Mexican endurance athletes drink chia constantly.
I'm not an endurance athlete, but I'm Mexican, and I grew up drinking chia just as a regular drink. My mom would just put some water in a jug and put it in the refrigerator and drink it as normal.
Have it all day long.
All day long.
So another question, a lot of the people that I talk to have questions about omega-3s, and I think that fish is better, fish omega-3s.
There's a lot of discussion about that docosahexaenoic acid, which is DHA, is better than linoleic acid, and they're actually adding DHA now to milk and other things.
Right, and to prenatal vitamins.
Even for anybody. And so linoleic acid, I don't, they're saying that the science is stronger for DHA than linoleic acid, but, coming from the Chumash point of view, Chumash ate lots of fish also. Chia was the one they used for these purposes. But, maybe that's just because they were getting plenty of fish anyway. And, people who are meat eaters and don't eat fish, maybe just that slight change to using fish instead of beef, that may be a big boost in their health for them, So, which one is better? I don't know. I think it depends on your base diet. Personally, I'm vegetarian, I don't get much DHA except when my wife serves fish, but let's not talk about that. So, I don't know. It's an interesting question. I think it depends on your basal diet, but we need more science to answer those questions. Thanks for coming today. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. Please have more breakfast.
Just a couple quick announcements before we leave. If you have possible suggestions for topics you'd like to hear or areas you'd like to hear about, we're making more and more connections with different faculties, so we'll be putting our we may already have this year's symposium scheduled together. I don't know, I think we have in the next few months, which by the way, next month, July, I forget the date, the first Wednesday, I think it's the 7th, no, 6th? No, it's next week, because we wanted to avoid the July 4th holiday. So the week after the July 4th holiday, on
10th.
Wednesday, the 10th, I think, we will have a really interesting talk on the role of spirituality in integrative health. It will be on the University Park campus, probably at the Office of Religious Life. Dean Barun Soni, the Dean of the Office of Religious Life, will be speaking, and we're actually trying to get a couple other speakers and do it as a panel discussion. But however it happens, that will be the topic. And I wanted to, Robert, you had an announcement for the art project. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Robert Horsting. I'm an oral historian and filmmaker, and I'm a volunteer at the Institute for Genetic Medicine Art Gallery with Lynn Crandall. And we have a forum coming up. There's the current art exhibit there is called Aging People, Aging Planet. And as the last forum under that theme, our upcoming forum is called Memories of the Way We Were. We're dealing with memory issues, the importance of preserving memories through oral histories, new innovative treatments. One of the presenters will be presenting a technology they developed over 15 years that includes auditory, vision, through imagery, and also aromatherapies to spark memory. It can be used in multiple different applications, you know, as far as, well, I mean, it's pretty open. There's music therapy that is also, there's a program called Music and Memory. And in patients that have Alzheimer's or dementia that have totally, for all intents and purposes, seem to be catatonic, suddenly they got an iPod on, they got music. If they have the knowledge of relative that can give them that background and let them know what music has been important in their life, they can individualize that music on that iPod. And it was the guy that is in a video link that we had from this group. And not too long later, this guy, he's humming, he's kind of gyrating, he's moving along to it. And I don't know what the time lapse is, but during the course of this video, they took the microphone, I mean the headset off, said, we'll get back to you, we just want to ask you a few questions. And in doing so, they asked him, you know, how long has music been important to you? Oh, you know, it's been since like I was 4 years old. And, well, what's your favorite music? Oh, Cab Calloway. And then he starts singing stuff, you know, and I mean, he really sprung to life. There's just amazing stuff going on out there. I'd encourage you to come. And also, a little bit of an embarrassment being on the USC campus, we have a researcher in Alzheimer's from UCLA who's going to speak. We do not have a doctor from SC, and I would love to get one that can speak to either Alzheimer's or dementia. We want to be inclusive and definitely open this up to SC. You know, we're on the campus. We want somebody to represent SC. So I heard your neurology.
We have the funded continuously for 28 years, the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center with a big website and major
Please help
presence.
me
Yes.
arrange somebody to
Just
speak.
Google, just Google USC ADRC.
The chief of the department is an Alzheimer's research.
Pardon?
Wayne Chen is an Alzheimer's. Yeah, we have offices.
Yeah.
So,
Kids videos.
So I've got flyers here. Please consider attending. This is going to be on the 22nd from 2:30 to 6:30. We'd love to have you come. If you know people that are in the field or just families that this would be important to, because they'll learn new therapies. And you know, my mother actually has dementia. She goes to a daycare. Somebody will be coming from there. It's called One Generation. And the funny thing is, it's 2 generations because they do a combining of preschool and a senior daycare. And you know, the fact that they can now act as a parent, act as a grandparent, and interact with these little kids, they forget their own woes, and they become very nurturing. And my mother will not remember that she was with these people, excuse me, with these kids, but she enjoys every moment of it. And she's really the ultimate example of living in the moment. She enjoys herself, that's all I tell her. That's all you gotta worry about. As long as you're enjoying yourself, don't worry about what you can recall. So please come.
If I could just add to what Robert's already said, this multi-sensory system that we will be demonstrating on the 22nd, Saturday the 22nd, is also being used for dyslexics and learning disability, HDD, all these kinds of ADDs, right? To help the young people learn. So it's a multi-age, as you pointed out, in more ways than one, this seminar that he's putting on.
Those of you who want to hike with me, I lead hikes and I teach people Chumash healing. My next hike is in Ojai on Sunday, June 16th at 9 o'clock. And I'm giving a talk on Monday, June 17th. So let me know if you want to come in. Thank you.